Look at us, right on time and everything. Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Mastering Modern Selling. Carson, this is episode 105. I
Amazing.
can't believe that.
No,
Yeah, that's crazy.
every time I think about the episode count, I think back to the early episodes. I think back to when it started and when you guys kind of came to me with the idea. But then I also think about the early episodes and how far we've come.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, everybody, if you're on the podcast, thank you so much for joining us. As usual, if you like what you hear, you think that, hey, we got some things to share that are valuable, we'd really appreciate a 5-star review. Maybe even take a screenshot in your phone, share it with some people that could find value on it. We're trying to increase our subscribers because, why do a show if we're not going to get in front of lots of subscribers, right? And then for our audience that is on here with us live on LinkedIn, as always, welcome, and we appreciate your comments, especially today. Carson, it's just you and I. We don't have Tom here babysitting us.
I know. I'm kind of
So,
worried about that. I mean, he kind of corrals us, brings us back when we go awry. But who knows?
I know.
Who knows where
So,
it'll.
Tom may be joining us in the comments. I think he's on a plane somewhere. But, and always,
I
as
just hope
always,
he
for
didn't get thrown off the plane for like jumping up and getting upset at us.
he might. He's probably going to think we ruined the show. But and so for everybody, if you join us in the comments, we'll bring a lot of the comments up on screen and we'll answer questions. And really, you help us make the show a lot better. So thanks for joining us. And then I will throw this out. As always, our show is sponsored by Fist Bump, which is my company. But and Carson's a partner with us. And hey, look, if you are struggling with creating content, using LinkedIn to either drive traffic to your trade show booth or to um, use a live show and a podcast, which is what we're going to talk about today, or use it with your own personal brands in order to create qualified pipeline and increase your revenues, we might be able to help you, and we'd love to chat with you if that is something of interest to you. The last thing I'm going to say, Carson, next week's going to be a great show. We have Mr. Mark Hunter coming back, which is always a good time. I think this is the third time Mark's coming back. He might be our Alec Baldwin of Saturday Night Live. Like he might be
Yeah.
our most returning guest. So
With a
for
close
everybody, we'll
second of
have
Larry Levine. So yeah, it's getting close there.
That's it. That's it. So, all right. Well, Carson, today's topic, we are talking about leveraging live shows, leveraging podcasts for building pipeline, building relationship, and obviously affecting or influencing revenue. We're going to go in a couple of different directions here with everybody. And I know you. I want to start with you with this part. You are a co-host here. You have your Salesman on Fire show, and you're on a co-host, and I always forget the name of your other show.
Connected Teamwork with Hilke Faber.
Connect. There you go with Helka, and I always forget the name of it. I'm sorry, but so you've got three
Changed names
shows.
a couple of times. It's changed names, so that's fair.
No, so is ours. So there you go.
Yeah.
But you're doing that with Helka. Um, Tell me, just give everybody an overview. Like, how do you find these shows are helping you in not just building your personal brand, but actually filling pipeline and closing deals?
Yeah. No, it's a great call out, Brandon. And I think, I always contemplate like our audience and the message that we want to deliver in this show. And this is a topic that comes up a lot when I'm talking to, executives that work with partners that support our ecosystem and technology. And it all comes down to differentiation, right? Every one of the shows that I take part in has a very specific role. Obviously a couple of them being more around sales and leadership, and another being all around building and nurturing team culture, right? And these are things that are top of mind for a lot of organizations, a lot of executives, a lot of teams that we collectively support. And I think, look, I'm an outcomes guy, and I think a lot of people listening probably are as well. I think it's important to be mindful that, the groups that we serve as a part of this show are looking to solve unique challenges and problems. And what these shows have done, number one, they allow you to show up, be your authentic self, showcase expertise, differentiate yourself or your solution or whatever it is. And when I think about outcomes, what's amazing about this, Brandon, and I'd love to get your thoughts because I know you have a lot of very specific, tangible outcomes. What I find is magical is when, as a salesperson, as a sales leader, I'm not able at times to get certain meetings that I, might want to book with business executives. But if I've asked them to be on a show, that might be the message that gets them to come to the table. Then we
Yeah.
break down in that relationship. We start talking. I understand their portfolio, what fits in their purview. They can start to understand a little bit more about what value I might be able to bring. And it might look different than what I initially envisioned, but the beauty is the relationship starts there. You never know exactly what that right magic message is going to be to get somebody to come to the table, but inviting somebody to be on your show does a few different things. It will spotlight and showcase that person that might be a potential client, might be a potential mentor. You're going to learn something. You never know where that relationship is going to go. And the other thing is now you've also added that person's audience because they're going to share it with their audience. Your show is going to gain some traction through that avenue, and it compounds the number of people that you can conceivably touch.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying it that way, Carson. I think everything that you made me think of there when you were saying it. So, you have three different shows that are really three different versions of content. Similar, they overlap, but the key that I heard you say is it's all three of them have content that your customers care about in some area of their business. And so it also then helps expand your personal reputation because when we have a show, and this is one of the ways that I think is I share with a lot of CEOs or C-suite and business owners. You can think of a live show and a podcast like this one similar to a breakout session at your most important trade show. That's if we deconstruct it, what are we doing at a trade show when we spend a lot of money in a sponsorship, 15, 20 grand or more in a sponsorship, and what comes with it is a breakout session. And then you're in the agenda and you have your topic and you get to choose who you put on stage. And the goal is to get as many people in the audience as you can because you get to be on stage and sometimes you invite your customers to come on stage and share their stories and be a part of it. And you got this little opportunity that you paid for where you get to be on stage, you get to have people in the audience, you get to build your brand awareness, you get to go on stage and go, "Hi, I'm so and so, this is who I am, this is what we're going to talk about today." You get to share your expertise. And like I said a bit ago, sometimes you bring your customers on stage with you and you let them tell their stories. Doesn't that sound a lot like what we do every stinking week? And we're not spending 25 grand at a one-time event in order to make it happen. And I think that this is why live shows and podcasts are so important. And I know a lot of people will look at it and say, "Oh, we tried a show years ago and it didn't work. It didn't pay off." I think a lot of companies start shows, but they don't necessarily know how to extend it or how to look at the attribution of the conversations that it generates. And so without the right attribution models, they erroneously come to the conclusion that the show didn't really lead to any business. And so they shut it down and move on. But I think one of the things that teams, that leaders really need to take a look at is when you look at it from that lens of a trade show, you find a lot of value in that, but it's always looking at the ROI. 15 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand, 50 grand sponsorship. Is it really worth it to get a couple hundred people in the audience? What if you could do that every single week? And in your industry, you become known as the show. And I really wish Tom was here with us today because he's got some great data on his other show too, around the horn and wholesale distribution and what they've been doing with it. But I'll be prepared to talk about it. So I think just kind of laying that foundation, what Carson said was he's got three shows with different content, but the core is that all that content is important to his customers. And what I was trying to lay for everybody is a vision of what a live show and podcast can do for you by showing the analogy of comparing it to a breakout session, which is very, very expensive. Carson, what do you think? How else would you explain that for people to understand like the foundation of these shows and the value of them?
Yeah, I think that's brilliant, Brandon. I mean, look, we talk on the show a lot about there is no magic silver bullet. You got to be where your customers are, and you've got to invest in these different mediums. And but we talk a lot about being on LinkedIn and different social channels and things of that stature. The beauty of doing these shows is that first off, you have the ability to send invitations to the people that you want to send by geography, by industry vertical, by keywords, whatever it is. You can also show up on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you want. Furthermore, you have the opportunity to engage the live audience throughout. I mean, we have a lot of prolific commenters throughout these shows, and I love that. People that I feel like I know because they comment on our show constantly. So you can
Mm-hmm.
engage the live audience. One of the other elements, too, is the ability to solicit for guests that are people that you want to learn from, people that you want to co-present to their audience and your audience that you think your audience could benefit from. So when I think about my audience, who are some of those guest speakers that can really impact my audience? And then furthermore, who are those potential guests that could eventually be people that you could have a mutually beneficial relationship? I've had deals that have come out of customers that have become guests on my show but never responded to a prospecting mail. And so, like I
Mm-hmm.
said, you never know exactly where these relationships are going to go, and that's the beauty. The last thing that I really want to make sure I expound on is the ability to leverage the content in today's day and age. What's amazing is when we create a live show, and like first off, you've got an amazing team that works on this Mastering Modern Selling show. There are ways that even if you don't have the ability, like I became a very accidental podcast host. In the pandemic, I was actually lamenting, like, man, I really miss just sitting around talking to people about sales, having water cooler talk. And then I realized I could do it anywhere. And we had this idea of like, let's just record these on Microsoft Teams, turn them into videos, publish them. People were responding. I had people reaching out to me saying, Carson, I want to be on your podcast. And I'm like, I don't have a podcast. I don't want to have it because that's like another responsibility. But when I realized two things, one, that I could create these whenever I wanted and post them, and two, that it was actually good for my brand to have that differentiation of having a show because not everybody doing what I do has a show, I embraced it. And then that's when I said, hey, let's buy into this. Being able to leverage that content after every show we do. We get bite-sized chunks, which are, maybe 30-second to a minute videos that people can resonate with. We can reshare that. We can leverage AI to turn the entire hour-long transcript into a brilliant article. Obviously, you're going to put your own personal touches into that article, but when it can spit out an article based on our own words in seconds flat, there's value there. And so, as I talk to sales teams, as I talk to marketing teams, this is an area where I can coach them. My own customers today that are within my purview as a tech company sales leader. When I'm talking to sellers, managers, marketing, I can help them understand these concepts and how they can leverage this technology seconds flat, making them more productive and stand out from the crowd.
That's really good. Carson, here's what I want to do with this. First of all, can we put up Carl's comment on screen? We got to address that. I mean, come on. I'm an accidental most things. Haha. Carl, aren't we all? I mean,
accidental salesman, never intended to go into sales.
Yeah, I was an accidental entrepreneur. Oh, crazy. But I think a lot of us end up doing a lot of things accidentally because we see something and we just kind of start sniffing and going down a path. And next thing you know, you're like, oh, here I am. Carson, I want to do this for everybody listening. Let's coordinate this a bit because this topic could go in lots of different directions. I think you and I should address four key things, four key ways that we could use a show to fill pipeline. So number one would be prospects as a guest, and then we can talk about how we do that. Number two would be how we share links to the show with a purpose. Generally, how do we share links to past episodes with prospective customers and use that to build rapport and create conversations? The third one, and I know this one you'll have a lot to say, is using the invitations, inviting your prospects to be a part of the show or come listen to the show or share episodes of the show. And then I think the fourth one would be how do we use the content from the show to amplify it out and use that to build our personal brand. And I think within that, there's things like we can tap a bit on how we leverage the live audience versus the recorded audience, how this builds brand awareness and brand reputation. And then we can also even address in there how we use the content in a variety of different mediums. So we use video, we use written, we use long form, we use short form. We can tap into those. But I think those four key things, I'm just trying to make it easier for our listeners to understand. We're going to talk about how we invite prospects to become guests on our show, how we share links to past episodes with a purpose, especially for prospects, how we use it to invite our prospects to come watch our show, and then how we use the show content after the fact to further grow our reputation and use it to build relationships with people. So, Carson, do you want to start there with how have you used your show to build prospect relationships by inviting them to become a guest on one of your shows?
Yeah, that's a great call out, Brandon, and I love that. And there's some key components that I think fit into each of those four pillars. I think you nailed them. When you think about prospect as guests, what's the ultimate goal you're after? I mean, you're really looking to extend your reach of influence, right? There's a few different value adds around the guests that you can have. Number one is who are the guests that are going to really serve a value to my potential audience? I've realized over my many, many years of prospecting that not every single customer is going to react and respond to the message that you think they will respond to or that you want them to respond to. One of the biggest mistakes a lot of sellers make is that they believe that sending a message to a customer or a prospect about what they care about is going to yield the response. And that's not the case. We talk on the show all the time about the quality of your message, the probability that they will respond. What is that right message that's going to be the most compelling to get them to respond? Now, there's ways that we can do that where, I'm going to send something that's very mission focused, very mission driven, something I saw on their LinkedIn, something I saw in their company reports. But when I think about leveraging a show, I have another show called Connected Teamwork, right? What are a lot of my prospects? A lot of my prospects are business leaders, right? They've created and they've nurtured a culture. They may have core pillars that they value. And the beauty of outreach is scale. I remember when I was working, Hilke Faber, I've known him for a couple of years. He did a coaching and training session for a teamwork and kind of a culture building for our teams a couple of years back. And I liked it so much, I reached out to him afterwards and I was like, we got to do something together. I don't know what it looks like, but I'd love to do something together. So we bandied around some ideas. We started doing these shows. And to that point, Brandon, we've changed the title a few times. We started out doing some things that were sales related. We started out doing some other things around, limiting beliefs and addressing limiting beliefs in career. And then we settled on teamwork. And the message that I was sending out, we were talking about going out and getting great guests. And he has a consulting practice. I was working with healthcare executives, and now I work with nonprofit executives. And what's a commonality, right? You've got these executives that are creating and nurturing cultures within their organization. And so ideally, the outreach was intended to say, hey, would you be willing or be interested in being a guest on this show? And the amazing turnout and response. Sometimes it was overwhelming how many people were replying. They didn't reply to the prospecting message, the one that sounded probably very similar to a lot of other sales outreaches. And don't get me wrong, I would imagine my prospecting message has a higher probability than some because I'm being very targeted. But You never know what message they're going to react and respond to. And the beauty was they said yes to being on the show. We got an introductory conversation. We kept it to being about the show. Didn't talk about my organization, but as we develop more of a rapport, guess what happens? You start to talk about what you
Yeah.
do today, what matters. And I've had multiple of these turn into deals and opportunities in the pipeline.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, I appreciate you sharing that with everybody and anyone who's listening. Um, there's lots of ways to convert a show and the content into tangible opportunities and revenues, but you've got to build up to it. It's not like turn it on and again, we've talked about this before. POs start falling from the sky. But this is I think I really like this strategy around inviting your prospects to become guests on the show. And, Carson, you and I are both big in the partner space, you with the Microsoft partnership ecosystem. And we have like 50 partners with Fist Bump that we work with as well. And one of the ways that I like to use the show is, it's mastering modern selling. And like, I think Mark Hunter coming on the show next week. Mark is a Fist Bump partner of ours. The way that I've developed the relationship with Mark was through the show. Now, granted, I comment on his post. I've engaged Mark in other ways, but the way that really solidified our relationship more was because we reached out and asked Mark to be a guest on the show, which he gladly did because he wants to grow his own personal brand. And he saw our show as an opportunity to expose his brand, himself, and his message to potentially a new audience. So often people are just very excited to become a guest on our show. And then the way that I used it, the way that we used it is I had pre-show calls with our guests where I get to know them, they get to know us. And as Carson said earlier, I don't use this to sell. If I did, that would be pitch slappy. They would see right through it and be like, oh, screw this guy. But you're building relationship. You're getting to know each other. And usually at some point they'll go, well, Brandon, tell me about your company. I'm not really sure what you do. And guess what? We've now got this relationship going. And Mark's been a guest on the show a couple of times, but he's also one of our partners. But for anybody listening, you can do this with your guests. Like we have Competitive Solutions, Seth Davies and Shane Yount, who are clients of ours, where we manage and promote their show. One of their strategies with the show, one is build their brand and their reputation in their industry by being seen as the host of the show. But one of their core strategies too is inviting their prospective customers to come be a guest on their show and talk about their challenges with using data to make quality decisions. And again, what better way to reach out to a prospective? So here's our options. Hey, do you have 30 minutes for a demo? Right? Or, hey, you know what? We have this show and we talk about these things and we want to call and see if you would be interested in coming on as a guest and sharing your experience as a title in the name of your industry or the name of their company. Which one do you think people are going to be more excited to respond to?
Yeah, and your intent has to be to serve and to add value. It can't be to sell, to your point, Brandon. That's not what's going to get people to respond. And I don't ask people to be on my show to sell them. I ask them so that I can explore the relationship. Frankly, I know that I'm going to learn from every guest that I have. And if there is something that transpires as a result, great. I just so happen to ask senior leaders and organizations that I am paid to develop great relationships with. And ultimately, I find that is a great path to developing relationships. I also, as we segue into the next piece, because I want to get your thoughts on the value of sharing links to past episodes, how we develop that building rapport, and especially as you entice more people to kind of, come into the community, come into the collective. I think that's key. I also want to point out something that's very, very poignant for a lot of people that may have considered a show in the past, done a show in the past, said it didn't work, or might be considering a show today. What episode was it when Mastering Modern Selling really kind of blew up? Because, we've done 105 of these now, right? It wasn't some overnight sensation. I mean, there were several episodes that were literally just you and Tom and me talking. And then all of a sudden it was like exponential hockey stick growth. We were number one in the social selling category. We started having absolute rock star guests that were like very well-known, prolific authors and thought leaders. My point is, don't do 5, 6, 10 shows and then just call it a day. Invest in this. And this will also feed the next couple of bullet points, because it's going to feed the ability to send content, past content, and it's also going to feed the ability to leverage the content that you have in different ways. What are your thoughts? How are you seeing value in being able to share links to past episodes?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there, Carson, and thanks for setting that up. Look, there's an organic way of sharing past episode content, and then there's the targeted paid campaign episode that we use, and I'll share both. So number one, and we talk about this all the time on the show about going slow to move fast. When you're doing your research around your prospects and you can start to identify what some of their challenges are, what things that they're working on or doing, we have now 105 episodes of topics. Now, granted, maybe the first 25 we don't share anymore because we weren't as good. However, let's say the last 55, from 50 on, we have 55 shows that we can share as a link with somebody and a message that said, from my research, I've noticed that your company is challenged with this, or you're hiring more SDRs, or you've laid off SDR teams and you're looking at it, whatever it may be. Here's a link to this episode that was on this with this person as a guest. Here's a link to this episode with this person as a guest, and we get to leverage like, hey, here's our episode with Jeb Blunt. Here's our episode with Daniel Disney. Here's our episode with Alice Hyman. And we have such a variety of guests we have such a variety of topics that we could usually find a show that's going to add value to every prospect, no matter what's going on in their business, and an opportunity for us to show up differently and say, as you always say, show up to serve, show up to serve. Now, for people listening, this isn't passive. It's strategic and it's active, but we are showing up to serve. It just means that we're not leading with the pitch slap, but of course we're strategic. Of course we want more deals. Of course we want to close more opportunities, but we're just not going to do it by going, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. We strategically show up and go, hey, here's 4 different episodes. Here's 3 different episodes. Here's the links. This is why I'm sharing them with you. Let me know any way that I can help you. And sometimes I get no response. Sometimes I get, hey, thank you. It's more generic. Thanks for sharing it. And sometimes I get, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm going to take a look at it. And I go, hey, when you're done listening to it, let me know if you want to talk about it. Like, I want to be there. The more I can help serve, the more that I am going to position myself as that trusted advisor. And we know trusted advisors get more deals. Now, the second way is the paid campaign side. And I could spend the whole show talking about this, but let's just do it really, really quickly. We take shorts, 2 to 4 minute clips from every episode, and we turn that into a post that we then put into an ad. And that ad goes to a custom audience. So for us, we have, and there's probably people listening to us that are sitting there going, hey, I must be in that database. You probably are. We have a list of about 5,000 CEOs, CROs, and CMOs from US-based companies in the $10 million to $100 million range in some professional service industries. What we do is we take a short from every episode and we put it with a paid brand campaign to that custom audience. We want them to see us. It's part of I see you everywhere and I feel like I get to know you. Now, one of the things that we do is that if somebody has watched over 50% of one of our clips, we then move them into a retargeting campaign. And that retargeting video talks about our 3-touch framework. That is how we leverage content in LinkedIn to create qualified pipeline with trade shows, live show and podcasts, and C-suite personal branding. So that's the way that we do it, much more strategic with paid campaigns. And we're spending a couple $1,000s a month with LinkedIn advertising. But I can tell you this too: over 70% of our leads, of our inbound leads that come in, they come from our show or my personal brand.
Wow.
So 70% of them. And just a quick story: I had a conversation today with somebody who said, first conversation, he said, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I know you from the show. I see you all the time." He reached out to us. It was an inbound lead. It said, "Hey, I'm ready to start working on my personal brand as a CEO of a company. Can we talk?" And the first thing he said was, "Oh, you look exactly like you do on your show. I see you all the time." I had no idea he was watching our show. And I'll tell another story. I have new clients who actually, before they became a client, they referred me to somebody who became a client. And when I called her, I said, "Hey, thank you. Thank you for referring her. Why did you refer?" I didn't really even know. She's like, "Oh my gosh, I've been watching your show for the past 3 months." She goes, "Of all the shows I listen to, yours is the only show I actually watch. Like, I block it off and I watch your show." And then she referred somebody who they were talking to about LinkedIn, like, "Oh, you need to call Brandon." And now they're a client and they're coming on as a client. And it's all because of the show, whether it's organic and people find it and they come and they listen to it, or it's through our paid targeted campaign. And we put the show in front of people. And we put the show in front of people not to sell. We put the show in front of people to get more people to subscribe to our page and follow our page so that they watch the show. And those are the two ways that we really use content from a show to grow pipeline.
That's amazing, Brandon. I'm going to make a statement that will piggyback off that piece, but also segue us into the next bullet item. And here's my message to the individual contributor out there who's just trying to improve their brand, or the small organization that doesn't have a ton of budget to be spending. There are ways to not spend a dime and have cost-effective demand generation, right? I mean, we're not doing a pitch to go out and create your own show and pay a lot of money, or to buy a lot of ads, especially if you're just a humble individual contributor, right? I can take links from these past shows and I can attach them to, I've got a part on my LinkedIn profile where I'm a co-host of Mastering Modern Selling, or of Connected Teamwork, or I'm the host of Salesman on Fire. And I can attach some of these popular episodes. You can put content, 5 links on those titles. So if somebody goes to my LinkedIn profile and they're scrolling down, they can see that role, and they can also see those links to past shows. Furthermore, the value that I get out of talking to some of these guests, what it does, I will say, like, in coaching my team, in my own sales methodology, I incorporate things that I've learned from my guests almost every single day. Whether it's how I'm scheduling my day, how I'm approaching my own, rigor and discipline, the terminology and methodology that I leverage when I'm engaging customers. So across the board, I'm learning so much that it's amplifying, elevating my game, and it's also elevating my brand as an individual contributor, as a sales leader, whatever may have you. And even if you have a small consultant firm, the ability to differentiate and then start inviting people as guests. I mean, not everybody's going to respond, but if you ask 100 people if they want to be on a show, people will say yes to you. You'll get some guests. And that's kind of how it caught fire with me. I've done over 100 episodes of Salesman on Fire. I've done 60 of Connected Teamwork, and we've done over 100 of Mastering Modern Selling. Talk to some greats. And I think there's a lot of power in that, and the ability to leverage those links for your personal brand and also for your company brand. Number 3, we want to talk about using the invitations and inviting prospects as part of the show. Now, Brandon, you made a great comment. Number 1, there's a lot of those. There's a lot of lead nurturing that kind of goes on here. You don't know everybody that's watching the show. There's like what Coleman likes to call the lurkers. There's always people that are out there kind of watching, but you don't know that they're watching the show until you run into them at some type of an event. And it's like, gosh, I love your show. I literally had a guy that stopped me in Seattle and was like, "You're on that show with Brandon Lee." I like texting Brandon. I'm like, "You're ahead here, man. You're global." So you never know who all's watching, and I think there's immense value there. But the other element too, when you're thinking about cost-effective demand generation, how can you leverage the invitation? Okay, so Brandon has an amazing team that creates a LinkedIn event page, which you can go out and do. I was talking to somebody yesterday, one of our customers who ran their strategic partnerships and marketing team, right? And I was coaching them on this. I'm like, you have a company page, you can go out and create an event. You can invite any individual can invite up to 1,000 connections per week. How much power is that? I got a call from an ex-colleague of mine the other day, and it's like, "Hey, can you promote this event for me?" And it was mutually beneficial because I had some customers that fit into this vertical. So I promoted it, sent it out to 1,000 people. Took me a couple of minutes. It was completely free, and within seconds, the attendance went from like 10 to over 100. Right, within seconds. So my point is, when you think about how can you leverage the invitations to this show to invite prospects to be a part of the show, you can look at different industry verticals. We look at what people that are in professional coaching, consulting, marketing, all of those types of things. Think about your audience. Where are they? And then leverage tools like LinkedIn to be able to get that invitation into their inbox. They may not be able to show up to the first show, but guess what? After you've done 100 shows, the chances that you've touched them in a time and place where the planets align and maybe they can catch you. The last thing I'll say on that thread, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Brandon, because you're the master of this and you've seen a lot of the statistics, is we're live streaming to multiple different platforms, right? So when we join, I'm electing to say, hey, I'm going to show this to my 300,000 followers on X. I'm going to show this to my 40,000 followers on LinkedIn. I can post to Facebook. I can post to YouTube where I have 3,000 followers. My point is that we've got a lot of ways to continue to touch your followers with this powerful content in a way that there's zero obligation from them. They might see it, something may resonate, and now you've got an audience.
Yeah, Carson, as you were saying all that for everybody, Carson says something. He hasn't said it as much for a while, but he says it a lot. Is anything you can do to increase the probability of your success, right? And these are ways to stay top of mind, to increase, call it your personal brand, your reputation, your business brand, with very, very small requirements, like small time requirements. You're talking about you can go to create your event a week ahead of time, and it creates a post in LinkedIn. And then you can share it to your personal account. You can tag people that are going to be a part of it. You can tag your speakers and take advantage of their network. You can go into the event and you hit the button that says manage and that says invite, and it pulls up everybody that you're connected to, a first connection, and you just start clicking. Or you could choose by company. You can go in and scroll, search by company and add a company name, and it'll show you everybody that is your first connection from that company. You can click a button and invite all of them. And as Carson said, you invite up to 1,000 people. Okay, maybe 990 of them don't come to the event. Maybe 990 of them don't even accept the invitation. But all 1,000 of them are going to see your name, they're going to see the show, and you're going to be top of mind for that split second. If you do this every week, you do it routine. Yes, some people are going to go, stop, because I'm not interested. But what we do know about marketing right now, and if you're an individual producer, you're a marketer. Carson used the right word earlier, demand gen. How do we create demand? They need to see us multiple times. They need to see us lots of times. They need to see us in lots of places. And so we can use the invitations as a way to, we're reminding them that we're here. We're reminding them who we are, but we're not asking them for a demo time. We're saying, I'm a host of a show. This is our guest this week. This is the topic we're talking about. Come on over if you want. And over time, what happens is more and more people start coming. I'm gonna address an elephant in our room right now. we're not getting really good commenting engagement today. And I don't know why. I mean, some shows we get and it's our comments are just blown up. So if you're watching this or you're on the podcast, Carl has made 2 comments and nobody else has commented today, which is unusual for us. Now, sometimes it's because Restream has a glitch and it doesn't actually stream it to all of our locations. Maybe it's the week. We're coming to the end of the quarter and more people are focused on closing deals. There's lots of reasons, but it doesn't bother me because we don't do this just for the live show. This is going to go to the podcast. And there's some people that listen to our podcast every week when they're on a treadmill or they're on a rowing machine or they're out for a run or they're behind their steering wheel. They listen to the podcast. So even if we don't get great live engagement, we still have the podcast. We have the shorts. We have the transcripts from a show that we turn into a newsletter with more detail for people that want to consume it. We also have the link for future use that when somebody, and maybe you're listening to this and you go, man, that's what Brandon did to me. When somebody asks about, hey, how are ways that we could use a live show or podcast? I'm going to send them a link to this episode. Go, hey, we did an entire show on how to leverage live shows and podcasts for lead gen and demand creation. Like, there are so many ways that we can use this, and the invitation is just one of the easiest ways to stay top of mind. Now, I am going to jump, Carson, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump to the end of the show too. And here's something. The event has registration. So people can say, they'll get an invite through LinkedIn and they go, yeah, I want to attend. And they're in a registration. So at the end of a show, you can go to the event and click and see everybody who registered or said they wanted to attend. And you could just go down the list and anybody who you're not a connection request or connection with. And if they're an ICP of yours or somebody you want to meet, what I do is it pops it up as like a pop-up window. And what I do is I look and I can see who they are. If they're a first connection and there's someone you want to talk to, send them a message. You go, hey, thanks so much for registering for the show. What'd you think of it? Use it to open up a conversation. If you're not connected to them, send them a connection request. Hey, I noticed you registered for our show. Thank you so much. I noticed we're not connected. Can we be connected? What did you think of the show? What comments do you like? Anything, you can use it to create conversations and expand your network. There's so many ways. I think the live show and podcast is just the best. It's really one of the best and easiest ways to grow personal brand and grow pipeline.
It's incredible. If anybody is out there listening, would love to get some comments on, maybe your thoughts, what you've learned, whether you've tried a show or not before, thoughts about, a show that you may be considering. And Brandon, I think you perfectly teed up, the multiple ways of pillar number 4, how you can use the content from the show. And I'm going to touch on a couple extra ones as well. Content repurposing is an amazing element of doing a live show. The ability to repurpose it into a blog post, as an example. So, I mean, I will literally go out and, like, the day after this goes live, it's out on my YouTube because I'm streaming live to YouTube. I can go into edit on my YouTube video. I can go into subtitles, and I can copy the entire transcript. I can go out to ChatGPT and I can say, write me a long, formatted, descriptive, subjective article from this transcript. Paste. And there it is. And I mean, you can dictate with your prompts, do I want to remove the names of the people? Like, I want to make it an actual subjective article. Or are there things that I want to add or incorporate? Like, do I want bullet points? Do I want key takeaways? Do I want actionable items that people can do today? You're the one guiding the AI. And so the beauty is I can literally turn that into a blog post the very next day. Something else I'll throw out there, because look, I know we're talking to a lot of people that have big aspirations. I am currently writing my 5th book, which is a labor of love. It is called The Show Must Go On. And I will absolutely, whatever it takes, it will come out this year. That is my promise. I said it at the beginning of the year. I had a little bit of a lull with it because it's challenging, believe it or not, when you have a full-time job at the greatest company in the world, and you've also got a wife and 3 kids. It's challenging sometimes to find time to write a book. That's why it's taken me like 4 years to do it. However, what's amazing is the ability to go back and like if I Google my name or if I go out to YouTube, there are hundreds of videos of like podcasts that I've been on of other people's shows. Whatever it is, I can go to YouTube. I can find an old podcast that I was on, copy the transcript, do the same thing, paste it, and I can actually literally say, take verbatim the words that Carson said in this transcript, write it in first person, and there's my words. I wrote it. I said it. Now, it's not going directly into the book, but it absolutely helps me with the outline of the book. I can massage it at my own personal flair as I type. But my words that I said to Brandon Lee 2 years ago in a show are there in pristine condition.
Mhm.
And now I can turn that into a book. How easy is it for you to turn your words into an ebook as an example, and now you're a published author? It's another element of your personal brand, another way that you stand out amongst the crowd. These things matter. These things absolutely matter. So whether it's turning it into blog posts, turning it into your LinkedIn post of the day, I can't tell you how many times I've taken old episodes and like little things that we said about a topic a year ago, and it becomes my blog post for the day or my LinkedIn post for the day. So you can repurpose the content in perpetuity. You can use this forever and turning it into, like you said, social media snippets, turning it into articles, blog posts, books. How powerful is that?
Mhm. Carson, how powerful is that? Explain to people, because I think sometimes we get so excited about, oh, when you take this and you turn it into an ebook, and you take this and do that. We take the video and turn it into shorts. Why do we do all that, and how powerful is it? Like, what does that do for you as an independent or as an individual producer?
Yeah.
What does that do for you?
Well, I mean, you said it earlier, Brandon. I mean, it's not everybody is going to be watching this show right now live. So there's, believe it or not, there's people out there closing deals. It's the end of the month, end of the quarter, right? However, the fact that this show is going to exist tomorrow on Spotify or wherever you enjoy your podcasts, the fact that it's going to be a snippet next week on LinkedIn and TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, you're going to meet people where they are when they are. And it is light lift. It's relatively inexpensive. So I use a tool called Opus Clip, Opus AI. I think a lot of people use this. A friend of mine told me about it. And I mean, I can literally go in, take an hour of content. It'll turn it into 30 snippets with transcript already written out. And you can post it anywhere immediately. Light lift, inexpensive, and you meet people exactly where they are when they are. And, it's funny, Brandon, because you made a comment about like, the first episodes of Mastering Modern Selling back when we called it Social Selling for Newbies. I've gone back and I've pulled some like little snips of like our early episodes. We were on to something, and like the reason we do
Mm-hmm.
it again, you asked about the value. What does it do for me? So what I think is amazing is how many times have you had a conversation with somebody or you said something profound in a show or in an interview or whatever it was, and you're like, man, if I could just regurgitate and leverage that again and again and again, like how powerful would that be? That's how powerful it is. Because you can take that poignant perspective that you shared today and you can turn it into content until the end of time. And so it can continue to invest in future relationships, plant future seeds. And we've talked about this on this show before. I may make a post, a video post of something we say today, and maybe it gets 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 impressions. I could turn it into a post that I attach to a picture in a month, have a different spin, use the same transcript, take seconds flat, same concept, same words, and get another 3, 4, 5,000 impressions, different people. And then whenever you talk to your prospective client, I feel like I already know you. That's how impactful it is because you've
Yep.
created awareness and credibility without really doing much of anything.
Yeah, and I think I love, Carson. Look, you have such a good reputation as a salesperson, and you're attached to the largest company in the world with Microsoft. It gives a lot of ooh and ah for people. But what I want everyone to hear what Carson is saying is that he focuses on using this type of content to build, and we can call it a personal brand. It's his reputation. It's staying top of mind. It's growing awareness of who he is. There's a million ways that we can explain it, but basically what it does is people go, "Hey Carson, I see you everywhere, and I feel like I already know you." So when his calls are going out, when his emails are going out, Carson and I did a webinar together teaching the Salesman on Fire methodology. And a lot of the feedback I got from people was, "Oh my gosh, I don't, how does Carson do that?" And I said, one step at a time. He does it one step at a time. The difference between most people and Carson is Carson wants it bad enough that he's willing to do that work. But what I believe Carson is telling everybody today is in this modern time, it's not that much work.
It's exactly
And
it.
one of the ways that we make it not so much work is that we have live shows and podcasts because we're going to end up talking for an hour on the show today. And we haven't got as many comments as we normally do, but we're going to have an audio file. We're going to have the video file. We're going to have a whole bunch of shorts. We're going to have the transcripts that we can use all the time. We're going to create a newsletter article out of it. And we're going to have links to this that we can share all the time from 1 hour of work. And what happens with all that is whether it's Carson's story of just happened to be walking through a lobby of an office in Washington at the same time a guy who had recently met me and knew the show. He's like, "You're on the show with Brandon." Or Carson, when you and I had lunch together in the Microsoft office there in St. Louis, St. Louis.
Yeah.
And that guy's like, "Carson." And, you're like trying to not drop your lunch. The guy was so excited to meet you. And no offense to him, and I'm not trying to embarrass Carson. This is just what happens. That guy knew Carson. He felt like he was buddies with Carson. It's like this mini celebrity thing because of the show. And I'm not saying any of this because we care about being celebrities. What we care about is filling our pipeline. And we fill our pipeline better because people know us and they feel like they know us because of things like a show and the content we post on social. I mean, right now, we can pull up Dr. Joe Hill's comment. Here's a great example. Joe's here on our show. He says he's fired up to post our interview tomorrow. Joe's one of my clients. And we did an interview and we're going to post it as a post and we're going to put it into a advertising campaign to a database of his ideal customers. And we are going to leverage this LinkedIn tool with very strategic content to build his business. But Dr. Joe originally came to me as a client because of the early stages of this show years ago. And now he's back again as another client because of the show and because of the reputation and the credibility that I have with him, primarily because of the show. At least it all started with the show. Carl Leva, who's on here, he was somebody we invited to become a guest on the show because he's the curiosity coach. And guess what? Carl's now a fist bump client. And Carl's introducing me to people in his network who he thinks need to be working with fist bump as well as a partner of ours. Carson and I don't sit here and tell everybody like, "Hey, look what we do."
Right.
We tell you our stories of what's working because this stuff works so well. And it's just a little bit of time. And I think the key thing too with the show is don't quit.
Yes.
Keep going.
That's it.
If nothing else that we learned.
That's exactly why this is a topic for this show. Because if you're going to truly master your craft, master modern selling, be everywhere where your potential clients are, this is a critical component. And I see it all the time. I see people talk about doing a show, or maybe they've done a few episodes and then they, put it aside. I mean, don't overthink it. I literally got started doing this by just hitting record on Microsoft Teams and recording a conversation with somebody, taking a 5, 10, 15, 20, 30-minute video and posting it out. And at that point, AI was not where it is today. Like I couldn't take the transcript, turn it into a post, but you better believe I'm so grateful that I have shows dating back 6 years that I can go back now. I'll give you a case in point.
Mhm.
So when I first started doing podcasts, this was right after my first book came out in 2010. Okay. And I started doing outreach to famous sales author podcast hosts, Jeb Blunt, Jeffrey Gitomer, and others. And I just sent them messages and said, hey, I've got this book, Birth of a Salesman. I've got a following on LinkedIn and Twitter in excess of 300,000 people. And, would love to be on your show sometime, that sort of thing. They said yes. So the thing with Jeb, like, this is literally like, I didn't even have a home office. I'm like basically sitting in my old basement, but the content was gold. And to be able to go back and take that transcript from like 6-7 years ago and now turn it into an article that's like basically by Jeb Blunt and Carson in 2024 about how to maximize fourth quarter as a salesperson, it's magic. It's gold. So
Yeah.
my point is like the more content, the better. Don't give up. Don't overthink it. You don't have to have some swank production. You could literally just record a video and post it. And now you're a host of some sorts and you can engage people with that content.
Yeah, and I like Joe's comment there. Don't overthink it. Suit up. Do what you can with what you got. I love it, Joe. Dr. Joe, thank you. You know, I I'll say this with everybody, and I think a lot of people listening might like find this hard to believe because of 105 episodes of our show. I wrote a book in 2012. So in 2010, I sold my third company. I was doing consulting work, and I heard people say, "You should write a book. You should write a book." And I'm like, I would love to write a book. Like I thought that'd be really cool to write a book. In 2012, I wrote my book. 2016, I still hadn't shared it with anybody. Major imposter syndrome. Eventually, I did pay somebody to edit it because I was worried about my own grammar and everything. I had somebody edit it and clean it up, and I self-published it. And I didn't do anything with that book. I did nothing with that book. I mean, massive imposter syndrome. After selling three companies, writing a book on growing companies and the way that I built companies and a lot about culture and managing you as the entrepreneur, which I think I'm really good at. I never shared it with anybody. When I first started doing podcast, live shows and podcasts, I had all that old crap coming. Who do you think you are? Nobody cared about your book. Why would anyone care about your show? Like all that stuff came up. And for the first several months of our show, I kept going, what am I doing? And honestly, if I didn't have Carson and Tom, I may have quit.
Well, thank God you didn't.
Right. I may have quit because if it was me alone, all that imposter syndrome. So anyone out there listening, man, I get it. I totally get it. But what I've learned is just keep doing it. Take from Dory and Nemo. Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming, 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 swimming. Right. Just keep swimming.
Powerful.
And the amazing part for me now is how many conversations we have. And, Carson and I joke around about each other about how popular he is or how popular I am. But we joke with each other, but it really comes down to we both experience things where we go places and people know us and welcome us with open arms, and we have no idea who they are. Who out there wouldn't want that as part of being, whether you're a business owner, you're a business leader, you're a sales rep, that you go places and your reputation actually precedes you in a positive way because you started taking advantage of this camera and this thing called LinkedIn.
Man, I don't know any other way or better way to add an exclamation point to this session than that. Well said. I appreciate that vulnerable moment too, because like I'm a guy that hated speech class, hated getting up in front of people. We have these mediums now where you can get in front of, 15 years ago, I ran a call center. I'd get up every day in front of 200 salespeople and deliver these like Wolf of Wall Street like speeches to standing ovations. And I thought I had made it. I thought it was the biggest moment of my career. And now it's like we have the ability to touch tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people globally with no barriers in mediums like this, from the comfort of our own home, wearing shorts and a ball cap. It's crazy. I say if you're a seller, entrepreneur, leader, whatever you're trying to achieve, embrace it.
Yeah. Yes, my nod to Darren McKee today,
Right.
who has been a guest on our show, who has done an amazing job building an amazing reputation for himself and becoming an incredible salesperson for the company he works for. So, well, Carson, I think today was great. I think it was, it was a shame we didn't have Tom, but we did pretty good without having our babysitter here.
I think so. I think he'll keep us around.
Yeah. I think he'll want to get back and get us focused. So, hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Again, if you have any other comments or questions, throw them in the comments. We come back around and we look at those as much as we can. If you have any questions about using a live show and a podcast for promotion, reach out to me, Carson, Tom, anyone on my fist bump team as well. And if you have any questions at all around LinkedIn, like I had a call today with somebody who said, "Hey, Brandon, I'm not going to become a client of yours, but I have some questions. Like I really want to do something with my personal brand, but I have no budget for you." I took the call. We had a great meeting. Like we truly are here to serve. And I know Carson and I have both experienced that, the more that we serve, the more wins come our way. And so it's selfish, honestly, in a lot of ways of just being able to serve. So we're around for you. Carson, you want to wrap us up and send us on home?
I mean, look, rising tides lift all boats. We do it for love of the game. So thanks for joining us for another episode. And until next time with Mark Hunter, happy modern selling.